Okay, I am thrilled to be able to talk to you about what it means to be made in the image of God. And the first thing I'll say that doctrines of the Imago Dei are always overdetermined and underdefined. It's usually something that we take a little bit further than the biblical texts actually warrants when we grapple with the concept of being made in the image of God. Usually when we rely on the Genesis text to generate a theological argument for Imago Dei, it's usually to defend the notion of human dignity. What we're after, especially in liberation theologies, is to reassert human dignity when human dignity is in question. The problem with relying on the Imago Dei to make an anthropological claim is that we tend to focus on how the human person represents God, and as soon as we bring up the issue of representation, we easily fall into the trap of idolatry because we often come up with laundry lists of what it means to best represent God, and that laundry list can either essentialize the human person or exclude human persons who don't meet the characteristics on our list of criteria. So the question of representation is always dangerous when it comes to what it means to image God.
To be made in the image of God is more than, and doesn't even really consist of the physical attributes, because God is spirit. It's more of the higher forms of thought, such as logic, creativity, imagination. It is also the freedom to choose. That's what makes us in the image of God. The very idea of being able to think logically, to make decisions based on logic, morality, ethics, a transcendent thought of ourselves and of the world around us, realizing that there is a creator and that we relate to that creator in certain ways. And the tie that we have is not just in our hands and feet in the physical forms we take, but is in our spiritual intelligence, our spiritual development, that God places His image.
So two things come to mind when I think about the Imago Dei. The first being that the only sort of compelling explanation or version I've heard of kind of what does it mean to be made in the image of God for me is about the Trinity, is about the idea that if we as Christians believe in a triune God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, three in one, then to me the way in which we are perhaps made in the image of God has to do with being in relationship. That if God's natural being is this kind of dance of relationship, then we as humans made in God's image carry that in us and with us, and that there's some way in which to be made in the image of God means to be made in perpetual relationship, that's when we're at our most divine or hardwired, or however you want to say it. The other thing about the Imago Dei where I've kind of landed is, and I sort of tip my hand as a sacramental person perhaps, that it's a mystery. And I hope that doesn't sound like a cop-out. I don't mean the kind of mystery where we throw up our hands and say we can't solve this, but the kind of mystery we enter into more deeply. In a way, for me, it's enough to know that we are made in the image of God, that's what we're told, that each of us, individually, collectively, however we understand it, contains that image of the divine in us, and that in and of itself, for me, ought to be enough, or that I hope it's enough for me to cherish each person that I encounter. I don't always do a good job of that, but the idea is that I don't need to know how or why. I just need to know that it's there.
So instead, I'd like to think of imaging God is to receive the invitation to participate in the life of Christ. So Imago Dei is less about an essential list of characteristics of the human being and more about an ethical task or a vocational calling to live into communion with God. and who God created us to be. It means to understand the basic form of humanity in the person of Christ, who most perfectly images God in being fully human and fully divine. So the issue of that communion of God with humanity is really the best paradigmatic case for what it means to image God. But that, for human persons, is something that really has an eschatological consummation, something that we haven't yet achieved. And so in the meantime, we're participating in the life of Christ as a task, as a process of becoming as we live into our calling. So that's my short version.